Hey everybody, something different. This is obviously World of Warships. Now, I did record some live gameplay right after the game entered closed beta, about a month or so ago. However, being live gameplay, I didn't really have the chance to filter out bad games as much as I'd like to and get some actual interesting action in. And so I had to wait for the replay system to be fully implemented, which it has been. Now, it's early days yet, so the replays are pretty basic. Can't really do much in the way of manipulation, can't speed them up as far as I can tell. Can't really do any of that, but at least it's a replay. It's close enough to being functional, and so here we have one of my last few battles in the Nagato, the Tier 7 Japanese battleship, before I managed to unlock the Amagi, the Tier 8. I'm in a fleet with Hazard Soul and Games Guy. Hazard is also in a battleship, he is in the Amagi, and then Games Guy is in the Fubuki, the Tier 8 destroyer. Now, an interesting thing to note, you see where the enemy battleships have all been spotted already, down in their spawn point. Most of the time, the majority of the team's battleships will spawn in the south of the map. In between them is a very densely packed field of icebergs. Now, occasionally you'll see a battleship driver get really brave and drive into those icebergs, and you won't see him come back out. The reason is because it's destroyer heaven. If you look, Games Guy is already there, as is one of the enemy destroyers. If you go in there in a battleship, you've got no room to maneuver, there's destroyers lurking around every corner, you will die a horrible death. And so, myself and Hazard Soul elect to go through the north of the map, where we've got some much better cover in the form of these islands, and there's also much less chance of a destroyer come flying around the corner with a full broadside of torps destined for our face. Unfortunately here, I'm too busy paying attention to what's going on over there to pay attention to what's going on in front of my face, and by the time I decide I need to turn, I haven't got room to turn behind this iceberg. I have to go to the left instead of to the right where Hazard Soul is, and I'm exposed in front of the entire enemy team with no cover on my left side. This is a bad situation. If I manage to get away with this, I'll be astonished, and it will be a pretty damning indictment of the enemy team's gunnery. Now you can see there's a destroyer lurking in there. He's fired his smoke, but he is actually lit, probably by the aircraft buzzing around directly over him. Now he's already fired some torps at us. This is a Fubuki we're fighting, so he has good long-range torps. Unfortunately for him, I have good long-range gunnery.
Enemy destroyer blown up.
Now, destroyers can be quite a handful in a battleship. They are difficult to hit because they're small, maneuverable targets, and often your shells will just go straight through them without really doing much, in one side, out the other. They don't have armor, so there's nothing to actually detonate the fuse on the shells. However, if you manage to get a good meaty shot into the machinery rooms of the destroyers, they are going to go pop. Managed to deliver the coup de grace into the enemy cruiser there. I think that's a Cleveland? Yep, Cleveland. The Cleveland is probably one of the strongest ships in the game at the moment. It has a phenomenally high rate of fire for its tier. It's pretty mobile, it's just a good all-round cruiser. But it's a cruiser, it's not going to stand up to the 16-inch guns of a Japanese battleship. So here we have Mongooser, who was advertising his stream earlier. Well, his stream just watched him lose all his hit points to myself and Hazard Soul. So I've lost some hit points at this point, but miraculously none of the destroyers have managed to land a torp on me, and it appears that the enemy battleships have lost interest. As you can see, their guns are aiming off to that big clusterfuck of friendly battleships in the middle of the map. I'm not going to complain, because this buys myself and Hazard Soul some time to get some good shots in. I aim forwards, trying to lead shots into this guy's magazine. They hit all around his forwards turrets, but unfortunately they do not actually detonate his magazine. Oh well, better luck next time. Now there is a big pile of smoke in front of me, which is worrying, because that usually means there's a destroyer there, and destroyers are not fun if you're in a battleship. Sure enough, there's a wall of torps coming at me, and it's the enemy Farragut. The Farragut is where the US destroyer line starts to get a bit more similar to what it is at higher tiers. The lower tier US destroyers are brawlers. The Farragut, while it does actually have quite decent gunnery and short range torpedoes, it's got a more conventional layout. Thankfully he explodes, and I somehow survive. Now I'm trying to hit that Amagi directly through his front, because if you hit them in the right spot you can actually put a shell right through their citadel and one-shot them. Unfortunately for me, the arc on the shell is just a little too high and it comes in above the sweet spot. Our team's cleared out the south end of the map. As you can see, we've got a battleship all the way through there now, and Games Guy's actually rolling up behind the enemy battleships. I led that guy a bit too much. As you can probably tell, I'm still getting the hang of gunnery at this point. I'd already had a fair bit of practice in the Nagato in the Alpha, but I'd kind of lost my knack for it, and it took me a while to get it back. This is a bad situation here. The Amagi's running away, which is good news because that thing's got big guns, but the Fuso is coming straight at me, and that thing might not have big guns, but it has a lot of guns. And I don't have a lot of health left. Worse yet, torpedo bombers. Unfortunately for me, the enemy carrier driver is somewhat competent and actually uses manual aiming for his torpedo bombers instead of letting the computer figure it out, and so they launch so close that I haven't got a hope in hell of dodging them. Now this is how you tell bad carrier drivers from good carrier drivers. The good ones will put torpedoes not too close because then they won't fuse, but close enough that you can't get away. Bad carrier drivers will drop torps from way too far out and you will easily be able to dodge them. And as a battleship, you're not going to be turning in a hurry, so you really need to try and anticipate where they're coming from. Often you can see the bombers coming from miles, but they're aircraft, they're maneuverable. They'll dance around you while you're trying to turn. You just have to try and make it difficult by changing course and speed as often as you can. Now, I tried to go for a suicide ram kill there on that Fuso, but unfortunately because he had a lot more hit points than me, my ship exploded, his did not. What it did do, however, was stop him dead in the water, and in a battleship, that is as good a death sentence as actually being hit sometimes. One thing I always try and tell teammates is never ever stop in a battleship. Keep going. It doesn't matter if you're driving out of cover or what, just keep moving. Your guns are just as accurate at full speed during a turn as they are while stationary, and the only thing you're doing by sitting still is making yourself an easy target. So here we can see Hazard Soul in his Amagi. A pretty serious looking ship. This is the Tier 8 Japanese battleship. And as you can see, it gains an extra turret over the Nagato that I was in. Like the Nagato, they are 16-inch guns, so they're quite powerful. The shell velocity on these guns is actually really, really nice, so they're quite easy to lead shots with. As you can see, the enemy was so preoccupied firing at me that Hazard Soul actually hasn't taken a single hit yet. His ship is absolutely pristine.